All right, so today I want to talk about how to leverage Claude's skills in order to automate like the worst parts about the sales process. So for the last like 2 months or so, I've been spending, like a year ago, I was spending like, 5 to 10 hours a week, researching prospects, researching companies, building messaging, executing on the messaging. And so what I've tried to do over the last 2 weeks is really leverage Claude and specifically Claude's skills to be able to automate some of the worst parts about the sales process, which is really doing that research and like enrichment process. So what we'll do today is actually walk through the workflow I've set up, how to actually build these skills, and then hopefully you'll be able to actually do the fun stuff of sales, which is actually talking to people and closing deals. Now, before we go super deep into how to build skills and what my setup looks like, let's actually level set and talk about exactly what are skills and why you should care. So skills are, the best way to think about it is like they're specific workflows that you do for your job or your company that you can package up into files and instructions that you can give to an AI agent so you can get a predictable outcome. Now, it's a lot of jargon, but really the understanding is like, hey, rather than every single time going to ChatGPT or Claude and saying like, hey, here's like my ICP, here's the brand guidelines, here's the tone that I want you to write emails, you can actually package all of that together in a skill and then just tell Claude or ChatGPT like, hey, I'm selling to VPs of sales this week, write me 5 good emails. And it will actually be able to write it specifically for your company, and you don't have to keep repeating yourself. So that's a key advantage of using skills. The other thing that's really, I think, unique for skills is you can actually start combining them to really build extremely complex workflows. So if you think about like the SDR role, or even the sales role in general, like in the start of the week, what does a sales rep do? They go, they find companies they need to sell to, they find the right people within those companies that could, make a buying decision. And they write, messaging based on the research they did on the company and the research they did on the person. So what you can actually do is break that up into individual skills. So you can have one skill like how I have, which is specifically finding the right companies and the right people within those companies that could be a buyer of my services or my product. So that's one skill. And you have another skill that is specifically tailored towards writing really good, highly converting cold emails. And so you can actually combine those skills together to build out these really complex workflows and make sure that what you get out, right, like the output you get is exactly what you're expecting and it's high quality. And so that's why when you can actually kind of build these complex workflows by breaking it up into individual skills. The last thing that I think is really important is a lot of people, they go into ChatGPT, they go into Claude, and then they start writing like this huge prompt on exactly what they need. Now, the way these systems work is whenever you write a huge prompt, right, they have this thing called a context window. So if I can break it down into like very simple terms, like every time you open up a chat, I heard this on a podcast, think about it like you're rubbing the lamp for a genie and the genie comes out and you get 3 wishes. Most people are using the first wish just to tell the genie about like their business, like what kind of email they want to write, the tone, the brand guidelines, all of that. So what skills allow you to do is reduce the context or the wishes that you give to your LLMs. So, if you have the right skills in place, when you go to a chat window with Claude or ChatGPT, what'll end up happening is the genie comes out of the lamp in this example, and it'll actually know everything about how to write a good cold email for your business, how to write good blogs for your business, how to research the ICP and the context for your business. So skills are really a good way to make sure that you can use the most of the resources you have and get the predictable outcome for systems like LLMs. Let's dive into how do you actually build these skills so that you get the most predictable and consistent outcomes. So every skills folder has a skill.md file. This file gives the agent or LLM context on exactly when to invoke or use this skill. So for example, for the lead enrichment skill, I have the markdown file pulled up. Here's the name and the description. And so it says, run the AccuSales B2B lead enrichment workflow. And kind of gives you a little bit more insight into like, hey, what tools to use like Apollo and Claude to find contacts, enrich company data, classify buyer personas, all the information that I need when I'm doing my research. And so the reason this description and name is important is when you actually go into Claude or ChatGPT and say like, hey, I need to find, X number of companies for AccuSales, the skill will get loaded based on the information that you have here. So if this skill didn't have specific keywords for the LLM to say like, okay, I need to use the lead enrichment skill, then it's not going to be able to know when to use specific skills. So this section, this is called the front matter, is extremely important to make sure that your skills actually get called and used when you ask for it, without you specifically asking like, hey, use the lead enrichment skill. And then this goes through like all the like what the skill is, like the reference files, assets. So before we go into that stuff, like this is at a very high level. This should live in the root of your folder. So what that means is it's not in any of the subfolders. So when you click into lead enrichment, it's right there, and it lives in the root of the folder. The second thing that makes up like really good skills are references and assets. And the skill.md file actually calls out everything, but let's actually dive into what those are. So here for the lead enrichment skill, I've got assets for the AccuSales brand, the ICP, the pipeline flow. So for example, here I say like, hey, what exactly is the AccuSales company? It's a sales agency and go-to-market engineering firm specializing with developer tool startups, commercializing open source software, right? So it gives a bit of like company overview, the value proposition, key differentiators, services, pricing, brand voice. All of that is in the references folder. Now, the reason this is important is instead of bloating the context window with information that isn't relevant, the AI agent will actually only load this file when it becomes relevant as part of the workflow. So here it says like load is needed, but don't load all at once. And so whenever it's like, hey, I finally finished the enrichment and now it's time for me to write an email or write some messaging, then let me actually pull together the ICP and the brand.md files. And so this is really important. This references folder gives the agent context on your brand, your vision, without you having to constantly repeat yourself. Think about this how you would if you hired an SDR for your business, right? You want to give them the brand assets, even template emails, so that they know exactly how to consistently do their job. So that's for the references file. The second one is assets. So these are specific example outputs of what I would need. So if I actually click into this is a CSV file, and this actually goes into like, hey, this is the, when you're done researching these companies, I want the output to look like this, with the company name, like headcount, funding information, short description, like, buyer persona, are they actively hiring? This is the information I need, like LinkedIn URL, contact email, write an opinion statement on why this company or this person should care about working with AccuSales, and then write an icebreaker for each person. So this is an example output. And the reason we do this is this allows the LLM or the agent to know exactly what type of information we need at the end of this workflow for us to receive in order to keep working. And so these are the files you need to build to ensure that your skill is as relevant and as accurate as possible every time you invoke it. Okay, so now that we know how to structure and build a skill for your agent, let's actually talk through how this looks like in practice. So here is Claude in my VS Code environment. I'm using Claude Code, and this is the input that I gave it. I said, find 5 sales leaders at developer tool startups based in the US and write a personalized email on how AccuSales could help them for each prospect. Not the best English, but whatever. And so right after this, it said Claude was like, all right, I'll invoke the relevant skills to handle this task properly. It invoked the lead enrichment skill, it invoked the cold email skill that I built, and all the relevant reference files. So now it's saying like, all right, I'm using this to find prospects and cold email to write the personalized outreach. Let me load the reference files I need to execute both workflows properly. So this is where the reference files come extremely in handy on like, what's the ICP, what are the brand guidelines, things like that. So it read the reference files, and then it realized that it needed to actually use external data. So I use Apollo for lead information. So it was like, okay, I need to use Apollo. So let me use the Apollo MCP tool to get the lead and company information. So I did that. And then I started searching for Apollo, and now it was searching. This was consumed credits, proceeding with the search. Interestingly enough, it actually ran into an issue finding the companies, but it was like, hey, the Apollo MCP ran into an issue. Let me retry the search. And then it retried the search and found, and this is the actual keyword. So developer tools, 11 to 100. The reason it went with this is in one of the reference documents, I specify that like we go after really about 10 to 150 employees. Really under 100 is ideal. So it's actually using the reference documents to come up with this search. And then it said like, all right, good results, 466 companies. Let me pick the 5 strongest ICP match. This is based also on the reference files that we put together on like, hey, these were some example customers that we've worked with in the past, example clients. And so based on this, it's actually doing an ICP fit from this massive search. So it came up with these 5 companies, which are actually really good. Yeah, these actually really well. And then it's like, all right, cool. Like, let me find for the sales leaders. Once again, it pulls up the reference files to find the exact titles. So these are the titles that I put in the reference file, so that it's making sure that it's actually calling and searching for the right people. So it went through each company, so Tooljet, Llama Index, and it looks for those titles. And it spits out like, hey, excellent finds. I have 5 strong prospects with clear sales leadership. Let me enrich it in the company data. So here are the final 5 they came with. And then from there, it's actually enriching the company information. And then here it actually ran into another issue with actually enriching some of the company files. So the cool part about these agents is whenever they run into issues, they retry and actually think of workarounds. I didn't have to do anything here. It automatically fixed the issue, found it said all 5 enriched with emails. Now let me complete the email enriching. Now, I have not done anything in this entire workflow except whenever Claude is about to do a bulk enrichment and it costs me Apollo credits, it just double checks with me. But there's ways for you to just say like, hey, don't worry about it. Just don't ask me again. But I do have it to where it sets up because I run pretty large pipelines where I might be getting, 100, 200 enrichment credits that get burned in this process. So since I limited this to 5, it didn't really matter. But I do have Claude just check with me before spending a credit. And it says, okay, cool. Like, here's why these companies are a strong fit. And it gives me some like all developer tool startups, open source, right size, like the 10 to 100 sweet spot, have small sales teams today, classic tier 1 signal. All of this information is coming from the reference files that we put together. And then it said like, all right, here's the information for these people, sales team size, full head count. And then it's starting to write the cold emails. So all of this was part of the lead enrichment skill and the reference files associated with it. From now on, we're actually going to be writing and using the cold email skill. So now it's writing the cold emails for each of the prospects, and it's using the reference files as part of the cold email skill. So in that skill, I actually gave it different frameworks for emails I can write. So this is situation, complication, question. Here, there's a framework for problem, agitate, and solution. And so these are different kind of cold email frameworks and ways to write cold emails that convert. And so it's actually writing an email based on the framework that I provided it in the reference files. So it's writing all these emails for each of the folks and sharing out the persona, the context, and the framework. And so it writes 5 cold emails here. And then here it says like, here are the insights on it, right? Like each email uses a different framework that matches to the prospect's persona. So we're using, situation, complication, question for experienced VPs, etc. And then personalization. And then all CTAs are interest-based. This is also something that I put together in the reference file. And then, each email leads with you like reducing the words, I as much as possible in these cold emails. And so I did all this together, and it said like, hey, like, do you want me to export this? So I said like, yep, this is the only time I actually hopped in, is to say like, yep, give me this as a CSV, and I exported this as a CSV. So let me actually open this file. Actually, let me do this. Let me actually open it on the desktop itself, so it's a little bit easier to see. Okay, so here is the actual file itself that we just went through. And so it has like the first name, last name. This is ready to import into whatever outreach sequence. I use Lemlist, but this is ready to import. And it actually goes and shares like the email body right here as well. So LinkedIn size, some relevance, and everything. I think the one thing I would probably change on this flow is probably make sure that it gives me the opinion statement that it generated during the lead enrichment process. But this is basically, you can run this at any scale, right? You don't have to do this at the scale of 5 people. You can run this at, hundreds or thousands of people. It just takes longer, but in theory, you could write a personalized email for 1,000 people and you go do something else in the process. And that's the real power of building these skills. All right, guys, so that's the video for today. Hopefully it was helpful. If you do have any questions, please put them in the comments below. I'm still getting, familiar with like how to make videos and, kind of present what I know to people. So any feedback would be really helpful, just around like, hey, this wasn't clear. I wanted to like learn this, or like, optimize it for the next video. But yeah, I'm here to help. Let me know how I can help. I'm going to try to post at least once a week on this channel. So please subscribe. And please ask any videos that you want to build. Like, I'm super into how AI has really changed the go-to-market space. And so I spend a lot of my free time on courses and kind of tinkering. So happy to share exactly what I learned. But outside that, have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video. See you guys.